welcome to Medfield TV's presentation of Meet the Candidates, interviews with our citizens running for local offices. This series is brought to you by the joint efforts of Carol Mayer, Town Clerk, Kathleen Emerson, the Medfield High School Social Studies Chair, and the staff here at Medfield TV. I'm Caroline Arcari from Medfield High School, and I'll be posing questions to today's candidates. They will have 2 minutes to respond to each question, and at the end of the questioning period, the candidate will have 2 minutes to address the Medfield TV audience. Today's candidate is Greg Sullivan. He's an incumbent running for the planning board. This position is for a 5-year term. There's one position open and he's running unopposed. Greg, thank you for being here today. How are you doing?
Just fine. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Your first question is, what does the planning board do?
The planning board is, what we do is we review typically any development that comes into town. It could be residential or it could be commercial. Typically residential is when they do full-on developments. You sort of see it around town where they build multiple housing lots. And so we review not so much the houses, but the lots, the streets, all the utilities, and we work with other entities in town such as the DPW and the Conservation Commission to make sure that all of the submissions, all of their drawings meet our requirements. There's a whole set of requirements for doing a subdivision in Medfield, and we make sure that they meet all of those requirements.
Wow. How long have you been a member of the planning board?
I have been an associate member for 2 years, but just last year one of the sitting members stepped down, and as associate member we then are moved into a full-on member. Associate members don't get to vote. We get to do all the work of the planning board, but we don't get to vote. But then when if for whatever reason, if a planning board member steps down in the middle of their term, one of the associates steps in and becomes a voting member of that of the board. And then when that seat is up for re-election, we go and essentially go to the voters and run for that position. And this is my first time running for election for that seat.
Oh, wow. What do you like about your position?
Planning boards, previously I was on the warrant committee, and so I still wanted to be able to do things for the town, and my background as an architect, I felt that the planning board would be a great opportunity to be able to sort of take what I do as professionally and be able to apply it to what they do at the planning board. And so I thought that was a good mix, and still being able to essentially give time and being a part of the town.
Yeah. Why are you running?
Why am I running? Well, the reason I sort of wanted to become an associate member is I saw a lot of things coming up in town that sort of I thought needed that we need to address. One of them being affordable housing and the issues with 40B. And how we meet 40B. You know, do we build one huge location that meets all of our 40B requirements, or would we rather sprinkle these developments around the town so that there isn't one large development, which we've seen, and the town doesn't like that, or smaller developments. And so I wanted to be part of that. Also, things related to changes of the zoning bylaws. The planning board is the committee that reviews all changes, proposed changes to the zoning bylaws, and we review and have public meetings for all of the changes. The public comes in and we discuss, and we vote to either approve or not approve these zoning bylaws that then go to town meeting. Essentially, the residents of Medfield are the final say on all zoning bylaw changes during the town meeting. And so we sort of do all of the heavy lifting. We do all the reviewing and writing of these zoning bylaws and then present it to the town meeting.
Oh, wow. What difference does being appointed versus being elected have on your role?
Like I had said previously, essentially being appointed is you do all the work but don't get to vote. While now getting elected, now I would become a voting member, and I sit for the 5 years unless for some reason I step down. So that's sort of the biggest difference between being appointed and elected for the planning board.
Yeah, that's so cool. What past experience do you have that qualifies you for this job?
I am an architect, and I was educated as such. I'm very much interested in the built environment, which is what the planning board basically deals with. And so I feel that my experience as an architect dealing with buildings and roads and everything that's involved in the architecture profession leads me with a lot of experience toward understanding what that Medfield might want to do going forward in our development.
Yeah, definitely. What have you done in the past or plan on doing going forward to improve your position?
Just recently, we just got passed at the town meeting some changes to the residential urban district, which is that residential neighborhood directly around downtown Medfield. And there was an issue going forward with a lot of two families being built. They were tearing down single-family homes and putting up quite large two-family homes. And so we were reacting to a lot of people's objections to that. And so we wrote a whole slew of zoning bylaw changes that now controls the building of two families. It doesn't stop two families from being built, but now we get to control its size, what it looks like, so it meets in the environment. Going forward, we sort of want to, the biggest issue now is, of course, the Medfield Hospital, and that's going to require some zoning bylaw changes. And so the planning board sort of works with the Medfield Hospital Committee in looking at zoning changes that we want to get what we want up at the Medfield Hospital site. Other thing that's possibly coming forward is possibly some design guidelines for commercial buildings in town, so that commercial buildings have sort of fit in better with Medfield or are more responsive to the look and feel of the town of Medfield.
Oh, that's really good. Does the planning board work on their own, or do you collaborate with other town officials?
A lot of work is alone, but then a lot of work is also with for reviewing. We get comments from the DPW, we get on certain things. For things having to do with public safety, we look to the fire department and police department. Like there's was recently a project that came before us for Medfield Children's Center, and one of the concerns was, because of where it was located, was safety and being able to get cars in and out of, and also getting a fire truck in and out. So we worked with the fire department, we worked with the police department to make sure with traffic studies. We also have a consultant who works with the planning board every year. That we have them on retainer, and they do a lot of reviewing of a lot of the proposals come to us, and they identify any things that we might be concerned about or want to address.
Oh, wow. How do you balance developing land versus keeping with citizens' interest in maintaining Medfield?
It's a sort of a thin line you can walk. You're not going to stop growth in Medfield. I think what we want to do is growth. Change is coming. It always is. It's just a matter of how we manage that change and how we manage that growth. And so we do that as through the planning board, through these bylaw changes, through these design review processes such as the two-family, and those are sort of things. And so we as a planning board need to sort of, a lot of times we're reactionary, such as the two-family incidents where we found a lot of things were happening that we wanted to control, and we reacted to that. But I think we also want to look ahead and see what sort of things are coming in the future that we may want to sort of understand and be able to set up mechanisms to control that growth and direct that growth where we want it and when we want it.
Yeah. How does the planning board avoid conflict of interest?
There's actually, the state of Massachusetts has fairly strict rules on conflict of interest. But typically for the planning board, we would recuse ourselves for any project or anything that came before us that we might be directly involved in. For example, say I'm an architect and I was hired to do a project in Medfield. If that project came before the planning board, I would step down when that project is presented and not even be in the room during. I would not be able to present to the planning board or be in the room during the presentation. They may be my drawings, my design, but I would not be in any way associated to it when it's presented to the planning board, so as not to influence the planning board. And I am not allowed to discuss that project with any of the planning. So that would apply to any other planning board member. Now there are certain things, as you know, the planning board affects everybody in Medfield, so there's certain level of any decision that the planning board makes affects the planning board members themselves as being residents of Medfield. So it's not going to be such as say a judge in a court where you can recuse yourself and you have no possibility of being influenced. Here in Medfield, we're always going to be influenced by the decisions of the planning board because we live in Medfield.
Yeah. What happens when town organizations disagree?
Typically, there's town organizations disagree. There's not usually a lot of instances where town organizations disagree. Typically, as I had said before, the final say in everything that happens in Medfield is the residents of Medfield during town meeting, any changes to the laws. But in the interim, between town meeting, the selectmen essentially are the sort of the arbiters. So if there is any conflicts within town, it's the selectmen who probably will be the ones that sort of the decision makers. And if it's a conflict with the selectmen, they tend to have the power. Now, the laws are the laws, and so if it has something to do with zoning bylaws, it's no matter who's in conflict, the laws are the laws, and we have to follow those laws. If we want to change anything related to the zoning bylaws, then of course we have to go through the process and get reviewed and approved by the town of Medfield.
Yeah. What should the voters know about you?
I've been a Medfield resident for 16 years now. I have 2 sons. My oldest son has gone through this entire school system, is now in college. My youngest is in high school, he's a 10th grader. So I've been a long resident in Medfield. I love living in Medfield. I think it's a wonderful town. I love that the town center is there. When my wife and I first were looking at a place to move from when we lived in West Roxbury, one of the things that really called us to move to Medfield was the physical downtown and the nice things about the downtown. And so we've loved living here and continue to live here as long as we can. And again, my experience as an architect, I think, have led me to have a very broad range of experience, and I think that's something that I think would go well with the planning board.
Yeah, that's great. What other hobbies or talents do you have besides town government?
I enjoy doing things outside. I enjoy drawing and those things having to do and that come from being an architect. But I enjoy fishing. I enjoy going to the beach. My family has a house on the Cape, so I enjoyed time down there. And then, of course, as a father, much of my free time is taken up by spending time with my family and my boys.
Mm-hmm. Now, would you please take a few moments to speak to the audience?
Thank you. Again, I'd like to thank Medfield TV for allowing me to speak tonight. And I'd just like to say that as a planning board member, it's always been my priority to do what's best for Medfield and what I think will be able to help shape and the growth and expansion of Medfield, such that it stays I guess was said a few years back, the Mayberry of Massachusetts. That it keeps that small town feel where essentially everybody recognizes everybody, and I think that in my past experience as being an associate member of the planning board and being an integral part of the planning board, I can hopefully be able to continue doing that moving forward.
I wish to thank Mr. Sullivan for participating in this interview. Please remember that democracy is not a spectator sport. Please vote at the Center on Icehouse Road on Monday, March 26th from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m.
The planning board is, what we do is we review typically any development that comes into town. It could be residential or it could be commercial. Typically residential is when they do full-on developments. You sort of see it around town where they build multiple housing lots. And so we review not so much the houses, but the lots, the streets, all the utilities, and we work with other